Hello to the pessimistic, optimistic, and everyone in between. My name is Connor Philippi, and it is time for tier list season where everyone is kind of ranking the teams based on how they feel. The way this is going to work is the Super Bowl contenders tier. These are teams that are instantly Super Bowl contenders in my book. This isn't just teams that could be. These are like the solid Super Bowl contenders based on last season and going into this season. The solid playoff teams are the teams that aren't quite there yet, but they're very solid, and I easily could see them making that leap this season. I just don't trust them quite enough yet to make that leap. And then we have the fringe playoff teams. These are the teams that either didn't make the playoffs last year that I think are going to make a leap into the playoffs, or teams that I think just are still in that range. They're not quite good enough for me to be like they could really pose a threat to the Super Bowl contenders, but they're at least in that playoff mindset, and it looks like they'll probably be able to make a run this year in the playoffs. And then there's the fourth tier, which is they're kind of getting there. They're not at the bottom. They have made strides since last offseason. They're not quite going to be playoff teams yet, but these are the teams that we are going to see at the end of the season. We're going to be like, yeah, they're just 1 year away. They're almost there. And then we have the very bottom. These are the teams that are not going to be good this year. They're going to be fighting for that number one seed, or at least they're going to be, we're going to be able to know by week 5 or 6. These are not teams that are going to have a chance at the playoffs, and it's not looking good for them going into the next few years, and they're clearly in rebuild mode. So we're going to start with the Arizona Cardinals. This is a team that I think is at the bottom. Now, I kind of want to put them at the getting there tier because they still have Kyler Murray, but because they got rid of DeAndre Hopkins, I think, would have put them in the getting there tier for me. But with him being gone, Kyler Murray, he's still a decent enough quarterback where I'm still almost tempted to put them a tier up. But the rest of the team, it feels like the cohesiveness isn't there, and it feels like they're 1 year away from tanking and potentially getting another quarterback to replace Kyler Murray. I really thought Kyler Murray would break that cycle of the Cardinals because, they drafted Josh Rosen and then they had to redraft the number 1 pick in Kyler Murray. And now it's feeling like there's just a few more mistakes and mishaps away from being right back where they started. So the Falcons, they're really teetering between the getting there and fringe playoff team tier for me. But I saw enough from this team to feel like they're pesky enough where they're a fringe playoff team. Now, this fringe playoff team tier is anywhere between they are going to be in the playoffs, but they're not quite good enough to be in the playoff tier, or they're a team that could barely sneak into the playoffs. That's kind of the range I'm looking at here. And I definitely think the Falcons can do that. This Falcons team was not bad last year either. I think that they definitely could make that leap. Cordell Patterson really is a huge weapon in a team like this. And they just have that guerrilla warfare style where they're not just in one solid scheme. They kind of have that we're everywhere all at once. We could win one way at 1 week and then win a whole other way another week. And they're just one of those weird teams where they're going to be constantly a headache to whoever it is they're playing. And I think this team could sneak their way into the playoffs, especially in a weak NFC. So next we have the Baltimore Ravens. This is a team that was fringe last year without Lamar, and with the additions they made and with OBJ, I think that I can put them in the solid playoff teams category. I think that they're one of those teams that have to stay healthy. They're a team that I'm concerned about in terms of health, and also there's going to be a lot of new faces. I feel it can go one or two ways for Baltimore where they added some star power and it could cause them to implode or it can cause them to really thrive. And I'm betting on them thriving. I definitely can't put them in the Super Bowl contenders section, but I feel like they're comfortably in this playoff team section. Next, we have the Buffalo Bills, and I got to put them in the Super Bowl contenders. I mean, I think that people are very down on the Bills after the way they lost last season, and we're still forgetting that the Bills are a very good team. They've got a stacked defense. Josh Allen, yes, he had some issues last year, but he was really battling injury all season long. He had that thing with his shoulder, almost didn't play a few games. He battled through it. A lot of issues that he had with injuries. And this team also went through a lot of adversity last year. I don't want to constantly be playing the Damar Hamlin card, but they went through a lot in the last part of the season. And so all those factors combined, I mean, I don't know why people aren't viewing this team as a Super Bowl contender again this year, especially considering that they lost to the Bengals in that game, that they had a rough game. It's not like they had a really rough game and lost in the second round to some horrible team. Like, there's still so many pieces around this Buffalo Bills team. I think they deserve to be in this tier. The Carolina Panthers, I have to put them in getting there. I think they're another team that could be really sneaky this year. They have some weapons. Their defense got better, and now they add in Bryce Young, who is going to be good for them. And now I feel like it's a possibility he could be a Joe Burrow type, where he starts playing well right away. But even if he does, this Panthers team isn't quite there yet, where I feel like they could be vaulting themselves into the playoff team conversation. The Bears, I have to say they're barely in the getting there section. Barely get it. But that's a horrible joke. I think that they have enough going with Justin Fields where they are hopefully going to get more protection for him this season. And they made some additions in the offseason. I think that the Bears were one step away last season from getting to this point where they're improving. Now, do I think they're going to be a playoff team? Absolutely not. I think that some people are higher on the Bears than they should be because even with this team improving, they still didn't win that many games last season. I think that they're solidly in this tier for me. The Bengals are Super Bowl contenders. I think that there's no doubt about that. They made that leap this last year from solid playoff team to Super Bowl contender. They almost made the Super Bowl again. Jamar Chase is going to rival Justin Jefferson for best wide receiver in the league. And I know that's controversial to say, especially as a Vikings fan, but I really do think that's true. So Bengals are again a Super Bowl contender. The Browns are one of the toughest teams in this entire list to judge because there was a lot of turnaround. Deshaun Watson only played half a season. Who knows how fresh he is? And he hadn't played in like 2 years, so maybe he could still make a leap and be good, but I also don't know if I can trust that. The Browns really did not play well down the stretch, even with Deshaun Watson. There's too many uncertainties around this Browns team. I definitely think they can get there, but I also think they could seriously implode. And Deshaun Watson, obviously, so much stuff surrounding him. It's tough for me to be that confident about the Browns. The Cowboys, they are a solid playoff team. That they have to get over that hump of consistently doing poorly in the second round of the playoffs if they're going to be Super Bowl contenders. Dak Prescott, he's Kirk Cousins basically, except he has a defense around him and he still is not performing. And it's a thing I say all the time and I get so much flack for it. But I really do think that I don't know which quarterback I'd rather have on my team. I might honestly have Cousins over Prescott. And it just is weird that year after year, there's more and more weapons that Prescott has to work with, and he still can't get out of the second round. The Denver Broncos are getting there. I think that some people are just saying the Broncos are trash, putting them in the bottom tier category, but I think that they can make improvements this year. There's a possibility that they can make even some noise trying to make the playoffs because their defense is still decent. It's not as good as we thought it was going into last season, but it's okay. And Russell Wilson now has an actual coach in Sean Payton, which I hate to say because you know how much I hate Sean Payton. But he is a good coach, I have to admit it, and I think he can do a lot of great things with this Denver Broncos team. I have to put them at least in the getting there, and they could potentially get to the fringe playoff teams section. The Lions, they are the line, right? They are the line of exactly between tier 2 and tier 3, where I feel like there's a lot more expectation for them going into this year than there should be, and that's why I'm going to put them in fringe, because people are forgetting, before they went on that run and almost made the playoffs, they were 2-6 at one point. It feels like momentum's really going to dictate their season, and unfortunately for them, they play the Chiefs right away. So it's going to be a big test right off the bat if they win that game, especially if it's a rough loss. How are they going to bounce back from that? Because it's going to be tough to have another 2-6 start and still make a run for the playoffs. So I can't trust him quite enough yet to put him in solid playoff teams. And then we've got the Green Bay Packers. This team is also getting there. I'm not saying that they're quite bad enough to be at the bottom. We just don't know what Jordan Love is going to do. They have a solid running game that is going to make them dangerous no matter what who they have under center. They still have a good offensive line. Their defense is decent. They just I need to see what Jordan Love can do, because I swear if Jordan Love comes in and starts playing like the next Hall of Fame quarterback to come in through Green Bay, I'm going to be very frustrated. But because I don't know either way, I think this is a good middle ground for the Packers. Next up, we have the Texans. This team is at the bottom. I think that the Texans could kind of get to that getting their status by the end of this year, possibly. They just don't have enough weapons and enough players around some of these new guys they got. They've got good defense in the draft, and then they added on CJ Stroud, and I think that they made some solid additions that could get them to a good point in a few years. But for now, they just don't have enough around those people to get to that point. So the bottom is where they lay for now. And then we have another team that made some additions to quarterback, and this is a team that I struggle with because it could be getting there, could be the bottom. I think that they are getting there because I think that they won enough games last year, and then you add on Richardson, and I think that he's going to play right away, and he could either have one of the worst quarterback starts that a rookie quarterback could have because of how raw and he just is not as developed as some of these other quarterbacks in the draft class, but he also has some serious attributes, and I think that he could potentially really rise above right away if he uses his running ability the way that he has in college. So it really does depend on the way the scheme is used, and this Colts team could be decent this year. The Jags now, they ended the season as a fringe playoff team, and it's going to be really tough for me to put them into the solid playoff team tier. They did make some additions in the offseason. They're another team that won a few games, kind of strung along some games. I'm sorry, I have to put them in fringe still. I think that there's some teams coming up that I feel like are a little more solid, and I don't know. I feel like they have to show a little bit more for me to see them as solid playoff team. I feel like this is a good company to be in. They're kind of similar with the Lions of last year, where they are a little bit overhyped, but I think they can get to that point. Trevor Lawrence could make that leap this season. I really want to see that. The Kansas City Chiefs, they're Super Bowl contenders. They are the top of the top right now, and a team's going to have to knock them down before I think otherwise. Patrick Mahomes is an unbelievable quarterback. I think that's pretty much the consensus at this point. The way he played last postseason with a hurt ankle was just incredible, and we'll have to see what happens with that ankle over the offseason. It looks like it'll be fine. Super Bowl contenders until I'm proven otherwise. Los Angeles Rams, they're not playoff team yet, so they're getting there. I feel like Stafford's injury, it's unfortunate because it seems like it is a chronic injury. I think that this team is slowly getting back to where they're going to start rebuilding, and in the next couple of years, this team will be at the bottom of the bottom. I mean, they gave up everything to win that Super Bowl. I mean, that really is the truth. They gave up everything. So I think that this is where they belong now. They're only going down from here, though. The Raiders. Oh, this is another tough one. I think last season was really tough for them. I'm gonna put them in getting there. I know there's a lot of teams in there right now, but there's just so many unanswered questions with this Raiders team as well. They also got rid of Darren Waller, which is something we really need to think of when we look at this team, because he made a big difference. And this Raiders team, he was kind of their lifeline. And they still have Josh Jacobs, and they still have some good players, but I feel like there's some things I need to see from them first. The Miami Dolphins. Now, this is where it gets tough because the Dolphins were a fringe playoff team last year, and with Tua, I feel like they could launch themselves into the solid playoff team tier. If Tua is healthy, I'm going to just assume he is. I think they're just barely in the solid playoff teams section. I think that Tyreek Hill sets them apart. I think that Tua, the way they played even without Tua last year, I think shows some serious resolve. And this might be one of the ones that I regret, but I have to put them there. Going into the Vikings, I think they're also in the solid playoff team section. I think that the Vikings toe that line with the Lions because the Vikings had a lot of unanswered questions at the end of last season. I think there's a lot of people saying, well, they won all those close games and they didn't deserve to. And whenever that happens, a team just instantly does horrible the next season. And that's not necessarily true because the case with a lot of those other teams is that they won a lot of games, got really lucky, and then that team just said, okay, let's just keep the same players, let's just do the same scheme, let's just do everything the way we did last season because it seemed to work out for us. And that's when they realize, oh shoot, we more got lucky than we had a good team. But the thing with the Vikings is they saw those things and realized why it was that they were getting lucky instead of actually deserving to win the games, and that reason was the defensive scheme. They fired Ed Donatel and they got Brian Flores in there, and that's why I feel like this team is going to be back, and I don't think they're going to win 13 games again. I think they're going to be more of an 11-6 or maybe 12-5, but I think it's enough to still keep them in the solid playoff team section, but they're going to be battling it out with the Lions all year long. The Patriots, this is a tough one because they got pretty close last year. If they got DeAndre Hopkins, I'd put them in the fringe playoff teams. But for now, they're another getting their team. And I know this is crazy to have this many in this section, but there really is a lot of them this year. I think that the Patriots are another team where Mac Jones is a good game manager. Can he prove that he's more than that? If he can, maybe that they'll get a chance at the playoffs. But they made some improvements. They got rid of some guys. It feels like they ended the season there, and that's where I have to keep them for now because they didn't make big enough additions where I can say that I think they'll be a fringe playoff team. The Saints, on the other hand, I think they are a fringe playoff team. And this is another one that people are going to disagree with because, I know what you're thinking. Two NFC South teams in the playoffs is crazy, but let's think about this. So we have Derek Carr, and I said I think he's going to do better in New Orleans than he did with the Raiders. I feel like a change of scenery is going to be really good for him when you spend your entire career struggling at a place and there's so much pressure around you. It's nice to just get a change of pace, change of location. Chris Olave and Michael Thomas. Obviously, Michael Thomas needs to stay healthy, but that's a really solid duo. And the Saints did pretty well last year with an absolute carousel of quarterbacks. Having one solid quarterback in Derek Carr. Derek Carr is a guy who knows how to get the ball to his top receiver. I think Chris Olave is going to have a serious breakthrough this season. And I think that this Saints team could potentially make the playoffs because their defense is also nothing to sneeze at either. So it might end up being either the Falcons or the Saints for the playoffs, but I think they're both fringe. The Giants, I think that they made some additions in this offseason. I think that Darren Waller on their team, you know what? With Darren Waller on their team, I think they're a solid playoff team. Waller makes a big difference with this team, and I think that Daniel Jones is improving. I don't think he's ever going to be like an elite quarterback like some of these Super Bowl contender elite quarterbacks are, but I think this team can be good enough to really battle with the Eagles and the Cowboys, and I see this team as being a 5 or 6 seed this year. The Jets are fringe. I'm sorry, I gotta say it. I think that Aaron Rodgers could completely transform this team into a solid playoff team. I can't trust that, though, because we saw what happened. I'm not comparing Russell Wilson to Aaron Rodgers there are some comparisons, but I do think Rodgers is a much better quarterback than Russell Wilson. That being said, he still went into the Broncos and the team almost seemed worse. And that culture change, especially with Aaron Rodgers being a very opinionated quarterback, he says what he needs to say. Who knows what'll happen with this team? So it's just one of those things where I feel like they definitely could make a case for the playoffs, but much more than that, I can't really trust in. So I want to see how the Jets play. That I think that very first week one game versus the Bills will be very telling, but they do have some really good weapons, and the combination of Aaron Rodgers and this offense with how good the defense was last year is very scary. I don't think I can put them in the solid playoff teams yet, though. There's just still too many questions. The Eagles, Super Bowl contenders, obviously, they are the one of maybe two. I'll see how I feel as we continue this, but they are really that one team in the that NFC conference where they're the team to beat. They are that team. They seem to somehow have gotten better in the off season. They're going to be even better this year. It's going to be really dangerous. I know it's tough to get back to the Super Bowl again, but I definitely think they can do that, especially because this NFC is so weak. The Steelers. I might make a whole video about the Steelers because I have very strong opinions about them. They're getting there for me. I think that I saw the NFL rankings, and I saw that the Steelers were somehow ranked over the Vikings. I couldn't believe my eyes. I really couldn't. I don't understand how the Steelers were above them because for me, I haven't seen anything from Kenny Pickett that proves to me, oh yeah, he's going to be great. And I think people are saying, oh yeah, Kenny Pickett to George Pickens is going to be the duo that's going to totally, make moves and transcend this year, and I just don't see it. I think that Kenny Pickett, again, I'm a bigger advocate than anyone of not judging a quarterback just based on its first year, but also you need to see something from him before you believe he's going to be something really special, and I feel like I need to wait and see on that. I can't say that the Steelers are going to be a playoff team this year. I don't know. I feel like I'm much lower on them than other people are this season. So the Seahawks, I'm putting in the fringe playoff teams. I think they're on the higher end of the fringe playoff teams. The Seahawks is very tough because they have a lot of flashes of being a good team, right? I think they could make some serious improvements from last year, but also Geno Smith had the one really good year of his whole career. And do I trust that the Seahawks are going to be as good as last year and that Geno Smith is going to be able to lead them there? I'm choosing to believe that they will be a fringe playoff team this year. It's just another team where, a quarterback plays well for 1 year, they extend him multiple years, and it's just like, I don't know if I believe in that decision or agree with it, but let's put them in the fringe playoff teams for now because looking at all the rest of these teams, I feel like the Seahawks are one above that. The 49ers, I have to put them in Super Bowl contenders because I feel like the San Francisco 49ers, it feels like they could win a lot of games and get to that NFC Championship game with any quarterback in the whole league. I mean, this 49ers team went through 3 quarterbacks last season, and they still put up a fight in the NFC title game. And the way they were destroying teams with Brock Purdy is just crazy to me. And it just feels like eventually there's going to be all kinds of teams trying to adopt what Shanahan is doing because it's just crazy how he is managing to do this, where he has such a great scheme, he manages the game to such perfection, he makes sure the running game is so good and so powerful that this team is unstoppable even with any quarterback in the whole league under center. I have to put him there. I mean, they continue to prove everyone wrong when it comes to needing an elite quarterback to make it to that point. The Buccaneers this year, I think they're still getting there because they are, I think, going to make a significant drop, especially because, I mean, if you've seen the training camp videos of Trask and Mayfield. I mean, I'm sure they'll make a little bit of an improvement from that in the whole camp because I mean you're basing it off of a few throws you saw. It's kind of a big leap to make, but I think it's pretty clear the Bucks are not going to be the same team they were last year, and even last year they were 8-9 with Tom Brady. The Tennessee Titans. Derrick Henry is the only reason that I'm putting them here. A lot of quarterback questions. I'm really excited to see that battle between those two because we're going to have to see. I definitely do think that it'll be close between the two of them, and I do think that both quarterbacks at some point will start this year, and we're going to have to see. But it just is. It feels like Derrick Henry is the only part of this team that is worth mentioning. Commanders. I'm sorry, I got to put them in getting there too. I know there's so many teams, but they have enough where they're not at the bottom, and I feel like they could be really scary. I think that people forget how good their defense is with Chase Young fully healthy, and this season I think is the first season where he will be 100% fully healthy and ready to go. The defense is good enough where they could make some noise and they could be a headache for some teams, but I can't put them in the playoffs, obviously. The Chargers, I think, is a team. This is going to be controversial, but I think they'll be a solid playoff team. Last year, they made the playoffs as the fifth seed. I don't know why. Ever since I saw the Jags celebrating on the field, the way I saw the Chargers reacting to the end of that game, I said they're going to be back next year and they're going to be good. I have a really good feeling about the Chargers this year. I can't put them obviously in the Super Bowl contenders. I think they're right solidly in that mix. I think Herbert could have a potential MVP season this year. I think he really is going to make that leap. He, I think, has the talent that he's always had. Plus, I think he's consistently growing as a quarterback. He's making less and less bad decisions. And I think next year, it might honestly be a dogfight in the AFC West between the Chiefs and the Chargers. That's how good I feel about the Chargers. And I feel good about this list. I think that this is a good list. And the getting there category is always the one that's toughest. Because there are teams you kind of want to put at the bottom, but you can't quite do that. But you think, are they a playoff team? And you can't quite do that. So let me know what you think in the comments. I feel like this is a pretty good mix. And again, don't say, oh, well, the math isn't adding up right because, these teams are in the same conference, so they can't do this and this. I'm not saying this is the order of the playoffs. I understand it's not going to match. But in general, this is just how I feel about all these teams. I feel like this is better than ranking them 1 to 32 because I feel like there is a very clear line in all these tiers. And so a lot of people are doing tier lists. I'm glad I was able to do my rendition of it. But let me know how you feel in the comments. Let me know if you agree or disagree with my opinions. And also let me know what other tier lists you want me to do in the future. I might do a quarterback tier list. I might do other things. Might do an MLB one, but we'll see what happens. But thanks so much for watching this one. Make sure you follow my Instagram page and also make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. I'm trying to improve my content and grow my channel as much as I can. And there's going to be a lot of NFL content coming up in the next few weeks and throughout the NFL season. So thanks so much for watching. Again, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the flip side.